Welcome back, guys. So before we get into anything around different pickup uses, tone controls, EQing on an amp, or anything like that, there's a whole range of different tones we can get just around the position of our hands on the bass. Now, it's really good to have a standard sort of starting spot where your hand is positioned. That's sort of your default setting, as it were. But we can get a whole different range of tones out of the bass just by moving our hands closer to the neck or closer to the bridge. And there's sort of key sort of frequencies that this sort of different positions bring out that can really make a bass line work. So going from your sort of default position, which for me is sort of over the middle pickup here, so roughly in the middle of the bass body, and that gives us sort of good rounded tone. It's punchy, but it's bassy and it's warm, and that's great. Now if we move closer to the neck, sort of playing towards this end of the body, or actually over the end of the neck itself, what we end up here is more emphasis on the bass frequencies of the note themselves. Now, there's a whole lot of frequencies that the ring of a bass string has, but if we pluck over here, then we're emphasizing that low end, which obviously in certain circumstances can work really well for the bass. What you'll find this end is that the strings have more movement in them than in the middle here. They're sort of more floppy, and that can kind of slow you down a bit when playing over this end. But if you do play there, you'll find that the tone that brings out, because of that extra movement that it has, it's less sort of immediate a note that comes out of the bass, but it has this sort of nice sort of blossoming effect of the note, which works really well on the fretless bass, but it works well on a regular fretted as well. So if you're going for sort of a more rounded, really warm, bassy attack, then over this side can work really well. On a completely different sort of tone level, if you are playing on a fretted bass, regular fretted bass, if you attack harder on this end, then you can get a kind of a pseudo slap effect where you actually hammer the strings against the frets on the end of the neck, and that can give a sort of really driven, heavy attack to your sound. And that's sort of a very much a sort of John Entwistle from The Who kind of sound, that sort of attack that he had when he was playing. So there's sort of a couple of different feels that you can get from this end. Now, sort of moving the opposite direction, if you pluck back here towards the bridge, what you'll find there is certainly more than here, and even more than the sort of the middle position. The strings are very taut, and there's not a lot of movement in them at all. And that sort of extra tension that you'll find at this end of the body will mean that you can really play a lot faster. It's really good for really fast runs because the strings don't move an awful lot, so you can fly over them with a lot more ease. Also, what you'll get at this end, whereas you're emphasizing the bass frequencies over here, you get more mids out of the sound here. It's a much more sort of mid-heavy tone, and that can work really, really well for cutting through a mix as well. And it's a very immediate note. It's very, great for sort of staccato playing, sort of very short notes. So back here is great if you need sort of a bass line to really be prominent in a mix. So it makes me want to play sort of more sort of funky bass lines on that one, where it's more sort of punchy and cutting through the mix, and that sort of tone. And that's it. Obviously, there's like a whole sort of range of different positions you can play in all along here, and you've got to find ones that work for you. But they're the sort of extremes to work with and experiment with. A lot of the time, I'll default to my middle position here, but quite a lot of the time, I'll also play sort of in this middle ground in between the pickups here, where you get the sort of more punchy tone, but you still have the warmth of the middle here. So I'll sort of move back and forth between them depending on the song that I'm playing, and sometimes within any given song. So something to play around with. Easy way of getting some different tones out of the bass without changing any settings at all. Really useful.